See this building here? This is where the 88 most powerful men in Iran were going to meet to decide who would be the next leader of the country. It was destroyed on the very day they were going to make that decision inside. And now these 88 men have nowhere to meet. They have no headquarters, no office. Any place they occupy disappears in a short time. The most feared regime in the Middle East is now running from shadow to shadow, but that's not even the worst thing for them. When I first saw this news, I thought it was exaggerated, but the deeper I looked, the more I realized that what's happening in Iran is unlike anything I've ever seen. Because while the leaders of Iran try to hide, the Iranian citizens themselves are doing something that no missile, no army, no sanction has managed to do in decades. And that's exactly what this video is going to show. But before we get there, you need to understand how we got here. Because this story didn't start with bombs, it started much earlier, inside Iran itself, with something much more silent. Let's go back a bit. In February 2025, the American government launched what it called the maximum pressure policy against Iran. The goal was simple and brutal at the same time: to dry up the regime's money, not let dollars in, not let Iran sell oil, to freeze the country's reserves in foreign banks. In China, in South Korea, money was stuck, unable to be used. What happened next was a catastrophe for the ordinary Iranian people. Without dollars, the Iranian government could no longer control the value of its own currency, and the Iranian money plummeted. Prices skyrocketed, and the cost of food went up in a way that most families simply couldn't keep up with anymore. A lifetime of savings turned to dust in a matter of months. And then, in December of 2025, the people took to the streets. Not in one city, not in two, but in more than 100 cities at the same time, all across the country. It was the biggest uprising of the Iranian people since 1979. 46 years later, the people once again said they couldn't take it anymore. But the regime responded with full force. Soldiers were ordered to shoot, and they did. Estimates speak of thousands of deaths, protesters gunned down in the streets, mass arrests, and the internet being cut off to hinder communication. Even armed groups from other countries were brought in to help suppress the protests inside Iran. The regime survived that wave, but it made a mistake that cannot be undone. Those scenes engraved something in the memory of the Iranian people that cannot be erased. The regime was willing to kill its own citizens to stay in power. And from that moment on, any loyalty that still existed began to unravel from within, in silence. This mistake will show up again later on in this story, in a way the regime definitely expected. But first, what came next was even more violent. Then came February 28th, 2026. The United States and Israel launched a joint military operation. On the morning of that Saturday, an attack killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who had been in power for 36 years. Along with him, generals and close advisors died. All of this happened in the early hours. Iran woke up that day without its leader, with no one clearly in command, without a clear plan to face what was coming.
Khamenei drank the sweet and pure chalice of martyrdom and joined the supreme heavenly realm.
And what followed was brutal. Within days, the Iranian Navy was practically destroyed, military bases were bombed non-stop, and air defense systems were eliminated. The missile launchers, which on the first day of the war fired almost 350 missiles, were reduced by more than 90% in less than a week. The arsenal was running out faster than Iran could use it. The American and Israeli planes discovered a simple and devastating method. They would patrol the sky, waiting. The moment a missile launcher came out of an underground base or from inside a mountain, it was destroyed, sometimes within minutes. Iran could even launch 1 or 2 missiles before losing the equipment, but they never reused the launcher. It was as if Iran was losing chess pieces without being able to replace them. But up to this point, that's normal. That's what you expect from a war. A stronger side destroying the other side's arsenal. What happened next is different, and this is where the story really gets interesting. The soldiers of the Revolutionary Guard, the most feared armed wing of the regime, responsible for maintaining control of the country for decades, started fleeing from their own barracks. They couldn't stay in any official building. They couldn't use any known base. Any place identified as military became a target. So they did what they could. They set up tents on the streets, inside soccer stadiums, in any space that seemed anonymous, enough to go unnoticed. But then came the part that no one in the regime expected. Remember that mistake the regime made at the end of 2025? Of ordering fire on their own citizens? That's when the bill came due. Iranian citizens started taking pictures of those tents, those improvised camps, those soldiers sleeping on sidewalks and sports fields, and they didn't keep the photos to themselves. They published them with the exact GPS coordinates of each location. And they did this on purpose, knowing that the American and Israeli armies could see it. Think about what that means for a second. Ordinary citizens, Iranians, living inside a country at war without free internet, under a government that just a few months earlier had ordered protesters to be shot. And even so, with a cell phone in hand, they were giving away the location of their own country's soldiers to enemy forces. This isn't an isolated case. It's not just a small group of people against the regime. Reports show that this happened on a large scale in several parts of the country at the same time. The regime had no way to control this. They couldn't monitor every cell phone, every post, every message sent on encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp. And even when they tried to block the internet, the information kept circulating. I know that at times like this, many of you might be asking yourselves, okay, but did this really work? Think about it. If you were a general of the regime, what would you do? You'd run away from the barracks, hide in civilian places, and pray that no one would recognize you, right? That's exactly what they did. And it was exactly that mistake that destroyed them. The Revolutionary Guard occupied Azadi Stadium, the largest stadium in Iran, as a temporary hideout. They thought that in a civilian space they would be safer. At the same time, Iranians with internet access were sharing the GPS coordinates of their hideouts with the American and Israeli armies. The stadium was then destroyed. It was bombed. Well, draw your own conclusions and think carefully about what this represents. For the first time in the era of smartphones, social media, and GPS, a regime is being destroyed in real time by its own population, at a speed and scale that no intelligence agency could ever replicate. Hacker groups have also joined in. They hacked into the internal networks of the Revolutionary Guard and leaked documents with the locations of secret bases, internal radio channels, and personnel lists. On the outside, the bombing. On the inside, the leaks. The regime was being destroyed from all directions at the same time. And that's when things get even more serious for the regime, because the signs of collapse weren't just military. The Iranian president went public and did something that had never happened before. He apologized to neighboring countries for the attacks that Iran had carried out against them. Bahrain, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, countries that were not at war with Iran, but were hit by Iranian missiles and drones. He explained why in a way that revealed more than he intended. He said that commanders died, that soldiers without clear orders attacked on their own, that the decision to stop the attacks was not his alone, but made by a group of leaders who had been governing Iran since Khamenei's death. In a single statement, the president confirmed three things at the same time: that the regime had lost control of parts of its own army, that soldiers were attacking other countries without anyone ordering them, and that the country was being governed by an emergency group because the leader had died. It's a public confession of collapse. And do you know what Trump's response was after that apology? He didn't accept it. He said that Iran was being beaten, that any promise of peace came from desperation and not from real change. And he warned that Iran would still be hit much harder. Meanwhile, the 88 religious leaders responsible for choosing the new head of the country tried to meet. First in their main building in Tehran, which was bombed. Then in Qom, a city considered sacred to Muslims. The building in Qom was also destroyed exactly on the day they were going to meet there. Government officials became afraid to schedule any in-person meetings. Any group of officials in the same place became a target. Leaders stopped meeting in person, afraid of Israel's precise attacks. Decades spent building one of the most sophisticated security structures in the Middle East. And now, the leaders of this regime can't even sit in a room together. And there's one more thing that hasn't been mentioned here yet. The CIA has started negotiating with Kurdish groups to open a ground combat front inside Iranian territory. The Kurds, a people whom Iran has always persecuted, were approached as allies. The former Iranian foreign minister himself went on a French television channel and, without realizing it, confirmed exactly what the regime feared: that operations were being coordinated at the borders. The war that started in the skies was coming down to the ground. And now that question comes back, the one that's been hanging in the air since the beginning of this video. What exactly are Iranian citizens doing that no missile, no army, no sanction has managed to do in decades? They are taking away from the regime the only thing it can't buy, can imprison, and can't destroy with any bomb: the loyalty of its own people. No regime in the world works without that. You can have the most heavily armed army in the region, you can control the internet, you can arrest anyone who protests. But when the population decides in silence that they will no longer protect that government by giving out coordinates, photographing camps, leaking information, that regime loses something it can never get back. The war from outside can destroy the arsenal, but it's the war from within that destroys legitimacy. And that's exactly what's happening right now in Iran as you watch this video. Now, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that the Iranian regime will fall, or will it manage to hold on? Leave your opinion in the comments. If you want to keep up with what's happening in Iran with direct and straightforward analysis, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And share this video with someone you think should know about this. See you next time.